The scorching Arizona sun beat down mercilessly on Sophia Valmont's shoulders as she found herself unceremoniously ejected from Dawson's general store, the shopkeeper's hand firmly gripping her upper arm. Her cheeks burned with humiliation as several onlookers paused to witness her public shaming on this sweltering summer day in 1878. "I've extended credit to you 3 times now, Miss Valmont," Mr. Dawson declared loudly enough for everyone on Copper Canyon's Main Street to hear. "I run a business, not a charity. You'll stay right here until you can pay what you owe or find someone who will." Sophia's throat tightened as she stared at the wooden porch beneath her worn boots. The 23-year-old schoolteacher hadn't been paid in nearly 2 months, not since the town council had begun debating whether they could afford to keep the school open through summer. With no family to support her and her meager savings depleted, she'd been skipping meals to make ends meet. "Please, Mr. Dawson," she whispered, conscious of the growing audience. "I'll have my wages soon. The council promises don't stock my shelves," Dawson cut her off. "You'll stand right here until sundown. If you can't pay by then, I'll have the sheriff collect your debt another way." The threat hung in the air like the heavy dust that perpetually clung to everything in Copper Canyon. Sophia clutched her empty basket tightly. The few items she'd selected, flour, beans, a small tin of coffee, now returned to the store's shelves. The summer heat intensified her lightheadedness from having eaten little more than weak broth for days. "Excuse me," a deep voice drawled from behind them. "What seems to be the problem here?" Sophia turned to see a tall figure silhouetted against the harsh sunlight. As her eyes adjusted, she made out a man she'd never seen before, broad-shouldered with dark hair beneath a well-worn Stetson, trail dust covering his denim pants and cotton shirt. His face was sun-bronzed and weathered, but his eyes were startlingly blue against his tanned skin. He couldn't have been more than 28 or 29. "No problem that concerns you, stranger," Dawson replied gruffly. "Just a matter of unpaid debts." The newcomer's eyes shifted to Sophia, taking in her simple calico dress, now frayed at the edges, and the proud but desperate set of her shoulders. "How much does the lady owe?" he asked, his gaze never leaving Sophia's face. $3.42, Dawson answered promptly. Without hesitation, the stranger reached into his pocket and produced a small leather pouch. He counted out $4 and handed them to the shopkeeper. "Keep the change," he said, "and I'd like to purchase whatever the lady had selected, plus a few extras." He tipped his hat toward Sophia. "If you'd be so kind as to point out what you needed, miss." Sophia stared at him, speechless, as Dawson reluctantly released her arm. She couldn't decide whether to feel relieved or mortified by this unexpected intervention. "I can't accept your charity, sir," she managed, finally finding her voice. "I don't even know your name." A small smile played at the corners of his mouth. "Jackson O'Malley, madam, and it's not charity. Consider it a loan between neighbors, though I'm new to these parts." He extended his arm in a gentlemanly gesture. "Now, would you do me the honor of showing me what supplies you needed? A man just off the trail doesn't know much about proper shopping." Something in his calm, steady gaze made Sophia believe this wasn't mere pity. With as much dignity as she could muster, she placed her hand lightly on his offered arm. "Sophia Valmont," she replied softly, "and I thank you, Mr. O'Malley, though I insist on repaying you when my wages come through." "We'll discuss that later," he said, guiding her back into the store. "For now, let's get you what you need." Inside Dawson's, Sophia quietly indicated the items she'd originally selected, keeping her eyes downcast as Jackson added several more fresh apples, a small sack of sugar, a tin of peaches, and even a small bottle of vanilla extract, a luxury she hadn't afforded herself in months. As they exited the store, packages in hand, the whispers and stares of townspeople followed them down the boardwalk. Sophia kept her spine straight, though inside she was a tangle of emotions: gratitude, embarrassment, and curiosity about this stranger who'd appeared like some guardian angel in her moment of need. "Where might I escort you, Miss Valmont?" Jackson asked, adjusting his grip on the larger of the 2 parcels. "The schoolhouse," she replied. I have living quarters in the back. It's just past the church at the end of Pine Street." They walked in silence for a moment before Sophia gathered her courage. "May I ask what brings you to Copper Canyon, Mr. O'Malley? We don't see many newcomers this time of year." Jackson's expression remained neutral, but something flickered in his eyes. "Looking for work, mainly." "I've been driving cattle up from Texas, but I'm thinking of settling somewhere for a spell. Heard there might be opportunities here." "There's the Rocking S Ranch outside town," Sophia offered. "Mr. Stanton often hires experienced hands." "I'll keep that in mind," he nodded. "And what about you?" "The school teacher, I gather?" "Yes, though the position is becoming rather precarious," she admitted. "The town's fallen on hard times since the Silver Creek mine reduced operations. The council is debating whether they can afford to keep the school open year-round." They approached the simple clapboard schoolhouse, painted white though the paint was peeling in places. A small bell tower topped the modest building, and behind it sat an even smaller structure, Sophia's living quarters. At her door, she turned to face him properly. "Mr. O'Malley, I truly cannot thank you enough for your kindness today. I was in quite a desperate situation." "No thanks necessary, Miss Valmont." He set the packages down by her door, "though I would consider it an honor if you'd allow me to call on you again." "Perhaps I could escort you to Sunday services this weekend." Sophia hesitated, warmth flooding her cheeks. It had been a long time since anyone had shown interest in her companionship, especially a handsome stranger. Propriety dictated caution, but something about Jackson O'Malley's straightforward manner inspired trust. "That would be lovely," she found herself saying. "Service begins at 10 o'clock. He touched the brim of his hat respectfully. "Until Sunday then, Miss Valmont." Sophia watched him stride away, his tall figure cutting a distinctive silhouette against the dusty street. Only when he disappeared around the corner did she allow herself to release the breath she'd been holding. She had no idea who Jackson O'Malley truly was, or why fate had brought him to Copper Canyon just when she needed help most, but for the first time in months, she felt a small flutter of hope. The next few days passed in a blur for Sophia. Her classroom remained half empty, as families kept children home to help with chores, or had moved away entirely seeking better prospects. The town council still hadn't reached a decision about her wages, though Mayor Wilson assured her the matter would be resolved forthwith. The same promise he'd been making for weeks. Sunday morning dawned clear and hot, typical for Arizona in late June. Sophia dressed with particular care in her best dress, a sky-blue cotton that brought out the gold highlights in her brown hair. She'd managed to mend the frayed collar and polish her only pair of good shoes. As she pinned her hair up, she tried to quiet the nervous anticipation that had been building since her encounter with Jackson O'Malley. True to his word, he appeared at her door at 9:30, looking transformed from the dusty cowboy she'd met. His dark hair was neatly combed, his face freshly shaved, and he wore a clean white shirt with a string tie and dark vest. The only familiar element was his well-worn boots and the quiet confidence in his stance. "Good morning, Miss Valmont," he greeted her, hat in hand. "You look lovely." "Thank you, Mr. O'Malley," she replied, locking her door. "You clean up quite well yourself." The small church was already filling when they arrived, and Sophia felt the curious stares of her neighbors as Jackson escorted her to a pew. Whispers followed them, but for once, they didn't seem malicious, merely interested in this newcomer who'd appeared in their midst. After the service, they lingered in the churchyard as other parishioners approached. Mayor Wilson, a portly man with perpetually damp palms, was among the first. "Miss Valmont," he nodded before turning to Jackson with extended hand. "And you must be the gentleman I've heard about. Wilson's the name, mayor of our humble Copper Canyon." "Jackson O'Malley," Jackson introduced himself. "Pleasure to meet you, sir." "O'Malley." Wilson repeated, rubbing his chin. "Not related to Patrick O'Malley, who used to run freight between here and Tucson, are you?" "No relation that I'm aware of," Jackson replied easily. "I'm from Colorado originally, though I've spent the last few years working cattle drives up from Texas." "Well, we're always glad to see new faces," Wilson continued, though his expression suggested otherwise. Especially those with financial means. I understand you're looking for work. That's right, Jackson confirmed, though I'm not in any immediate need. I've saved enough to take my time finding the right situation. Mrs. Hollister, the banker's wife and Copper Canyon's most dedicated gossip, approached next. Miss Valmont, we missed you at the Ladies' Aid Society meeting on Thursday. I had papers to grade, Mrs. Hollister, Sophia explained, though in truth, she'd avoided the meeting knowing the women would question her about her financial situation. And who is your friend? Mrs. Hollister asked, her sharp eyes assessing Jackson from hat to boots. Jackson O'Malley, madam, he answered for himself. New in town, indeed. Her thin lips pursed. And where are you staying, Mr. O'Malley? The Canyon Hotel for now, he replied, unperturbed by her interrogation. Though I hope to find something more permanent once I'm settled. Mrs. Hollister's eyebrows rose slightly. The Canyon Hotel is quite costly for extended stays. I've been fortunate in my endeavors, Jackson said mildly. Now, if you'll excuse us, I've promised Miss Valmont a Sunday dinner. He deftly guided Sophia away before Mrs. Hollister could respond. Once they were clear of the churchyard, Sophia allowed herself a small laugh. You handled Mrs. Hollister beautifully, she said. Few can escape her questioning so deftly. Small towns all have their Mrs. Hollisters, he replied with a wink. And I truly did promise you dinner if you'd do me the honor. The hotel dining room serves a decent Sunday roast. The Canyon Hotel was indeed the finest establishment in Copper Canyon. Its dining room outfitted with tablecloths and actual glass windows, rather than the oiled paper many buildings still used. As they were seated, Sophia tried not to think about how long it had been since she'd enjoyed a proper restaurant meal. Over roast beef, potatoes, and apple pie, conversation flowed easily between them. Jackson spoke of his years working cattle drives, of sleeping under stars so bright they seemed close enough to touch, of the camaraderie among men who faced danger together. Sophia told him about her students, about coming west from Pennsylvania after her parents died of influenza, about her dreams of expanding the school curriculum to include science and literature beyond basic reading and arithmetic. You're quite remarkable, Miss Valmont, Jackson said as they lingered over coffee. Most young women wouldn't have the courage to travel alone across the country to take up teaching in a frontier town. Necessity often breeds courage, she replied. And please, after sharing a meal like this, I think you might call me Sophia. Sophia, he repeated, as if testing the sound of it. A beautiful name for a beautiful woman. She blushed, unused to such direct compliments. And I shall call you Jackson, then. Their eyes met across the table, and Sophia felt a curious warmth spread through her chest. In that moment, the worries that had plagued her for months seemed to recede, replaced by something that felt dangerously like hope. The next few weeks saw Jackson become a fixture in Sophia's life. He found work at the Rocking S Ranch, as she'd suggested, proving himself skilled with horses and cattle. 3 evenings a week, he'd appear at the schoolhouse door after finishing his day's work, sometimes bearing small gifts, wildflowers gathered from the prairie, a book of poetry he'd found at the Mercantile, once even a length of pretty ribbon for her hair. They took walks along the creek that gave the town its name, shared picnic suppers in the schoolyard, and attended the town's modest 4th of July celebration together. Through it all, Sophia found herself drawn to Jackson's quiet strength, his thoughtfulness, and the way he treated her with respect that never felt condescending. When July melted into August, bringing even more oppressive heat, the town council finally reached a decision about the school. Mayor Wilson delivered the news personally one afternoon as Sophia was dismissing her summer students. Miss Valmont, he began, mopping his brow with a handkerchief, the council has voted to continue the school through summer, but with reduced hours and, I'm afraid, reduced compensation. Sophia's heart sank. Reduced by how much, Mayor Wilson? 20%, he replied, not meeting her eyes, and we can only guarantee the position through December. After that, well, it will depend on the town's finances. She nodded stiffly, forcing herself to maintain composure before her young students who were filing out the door. I understand. When might I expect the back wages I'm owed? We've authorized payment of half the amount now, he said, producing an envelope from his coat pocket. The remainder will be paid by October, assuming tax collections proceed as expected. It was less than she'd hoped for, but better than nothing. She accepted the envelope with a tight smile. Thank you for informing me personally, Mayor. After he left, Sophia counted the money inside just enough to repay Jackson and cover her most pressing expenses, with little left over. The prospect of a 20% reduction in her already meager salary loomed like a storm cloud on the horizon. That evening, when Jackson arrived for their usual walk, she handed him the money he'd spent at Dawson's. I insist, she said firmly when he tried to refuse it. You've been more than generous with your time and companionship. I won't remain in your debt financially as well. Jackson tucked the money away with a nod, recognizing her pride. Very well, but allow me to treat you to supper at the hotel tonight to celebrate receiving your wages. Over supper, Sophia confided her concerns about the future. I love teaching, she admitted, but I don't know if I can survive on what they're offering, and come winter if they close the school entirely. What would you do? Jackson asked gently. Return east. I have nothing to return to, she said, pushing her food around her plate. No family, few friends left. I came west for a fresh start. And you've made a life here, he observed. Your students adore you. The parents respect you, even if the council undervalues your contributions. But sentiment doesn't put food on the table, she sighed. I may have to look for positions in larger towns. Prescott or even Phoenix might have more secure teaching opportunities. Jackson was silent for a long moment, his blue eyes troubled. Finally, he reached across the table to take her hand. I had planned to wait longer before saying this, he began, his voice unusually hesitant. But circumstances may not allow for such patience. Sophia, in these weeks I've known you, I've come to admire you deeply. Your courage, your intelligence, your kindness to those children, even the ones others have given up on. Sophia's heart began to race, her fingers trembling slightly in his grasp. I know we've known each other only a short while, he continued, but out here, time moves differently than back east. People recognize what matters more quickly because life is uncertain, and what I recognize is that you matter to me more than anyone has in a very long time. Jackson, she whispered, hardly daring to believe what she was hearing. I'm not asking for promises yet, he assured her. Just time. Time to court you properly, to show you that my intentions are honorable and my feelings sincere. Would you grant me that? Tears pricked at Sophia's eyes as joy and uncertainty warred within her. Yes, she managed finally. I would like that very much. His smile was like sunrise breaking over the mountains. Then for now, that's enough. As summer waned, their courtship blossomed. Jackson proved himself not just a hard worker, but a man of surprising depths. He had read widely despite limited formal education, could recite poetry from memory, and played the harmonica with surprising skill. He attended church faithfully, treated everyone from the bank president to the livery stable boy with equal respect, and never pushed Sophia beyond the bounds of propriety. By late August, when the first cooler breezes hinted at autumn's approach, Sophia had to admit to herself that she was falling in love. The thought both thrilled and frightened her. She had come to Arizona territory to be independent, to forge her own path without relying on anyone else. Yet the possibility of a future with Jackson didn't feel like surrender, it felt like partnership. One evening, as they sat on the schoolhouse steps watching the sunset paint the distant mountains with gold and purple, Jackson grew uncharacteristically quiet. Is something troubling you? Sophia asked, noting the furrow between his brows. He took her hand, his calloused thumb tracing gentle circles on her palm. There's something I need to tell you, he said finally. Something about my past that you should know before things between us progress further. Sophia's stomach tightened with apprehension. Whatever it is, you can tell me. Jackson took a deep breath. I wasn't entirely truthful about why I came to Copper Canyon. I didn't just happen upon this town by chance. What do you mean? she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. My brother Thomas was killed 2 years ago, he said, his eyes fixed on the distant horizon. He was a U.S. Marshal tracking a gang that had robbed the Territorial Bank in Prescott. His investigation led him here to Copper Canyon. A week after arriving, he was found dead, shot in the back on the road to the rocking S. Sophia gasped softly, instinctively tightening her grip on his hand. Jackson, I'm so sorry. The official report said it was bandits, he continued, his voice flat. But Thomas wrote to me just before he died. He believed someone in this town was connected to the robbery, someone respectable, someone no one would suspect. And you came here to find out who, Sophia concluded, pieces falling into place. Jackson nodded. I took a leave from my marshal duties to investigate unofficially. I couldn't risk alerting whoever was responsible. You're a marshal. Sophia felt slightly dizzy as she reassessed everything she thought she knew about him. Deputy U.S. Marshal out of the Denver office, he confirmed. I've spent the last several months tracking the same gang Thomas was after. All evidence pointed here. Have you found anything? She asked hesitantly. Suspicions, mainly. Nothing I can prove yet. He finally turned to look at her, anguish clear in his eyes. I never expected to meet you, Sophia. Never expected to care for someone here. It's complicated everything. Why tell me this now? Because I can't bear keeping the truth from you any longer, he said, and because things are coming to a head. I've found evidence that someone's planning another robbery, the Canyon Bank this time. I believe it's the same person who arranged for Thomas to be killed. Fear clutched at Sophia's heart. Are you in danger? Possibly, he admitted. But I'm more concerned about you now. If anyone suspects I'm investigating, they might try to use you to get to me. Who is it? She asked. Who do you suspect? Jackson hesitated before answering. Mayor Wilson. Wilson? Sophia stared at him incredulously. But he's the perfect cover, Jackson finished for her. Who would suspect the town mayor? He's perfectly positioned to know bank schedules, payrolls, who's watching and who isn't. And I've discovered he has gambling debts in Tucson that far exceed what he could pay on a mayor's stipend. Sophia's mind raced, connecting dots she'd never thought to connect before. The school funding, she murmured. He's been the main opponent of continuing my salary even though the taxes were collected for it, if he's been diverting funds. Exactly, Jackson nodded grimly. I believe the bank robbery is scheduled for this Friday when the mining payroll arrives from Prescott. What are you going to do? Stop it, he said simply. And catch Wilson in the act. I have a wire out to the marshal's office in Tucson for backup, but I don't know if they'll arrive in time. Sophia took both his hands in hers. Tell me how I can help. The safest thing would be for you to leave town for a few days, he began, but the determined set of her jaw stopped him mid-sentence. I'm not running away, she said firmly. This is my home and you're. She hesitated, then finished softly. You're important to me, very important. The tenderness that swept over Jackson's face made her breath catch. And you to me, he murmured, bringing her hand to his lips. More than I ever thought possible. They formulated a plan as darkness fell. Sophia would continue as normal, but keep her eyes and ears open for any unusual activity around the mayor or the bank. Jackson would make final preparations to intercept the robbery. Neither of them mentioned the danger, but it hung in the air between them, making each moment together feel precious and fragile. When Jackson finally walked Sophia to her door, he paused, framing her face gently with his hands. Whatever happens, he said softly, know that meeting you was worth everything. Even if I'd never found a single clue about Thomas, coming to Copper Canyon would have been the best decision of my life because it led me to you. Before Sophia could respond, he lowered his lips to hers in a kiss so tender it brought tears to her eyes. It was their first kiss, and it held the promise of 1,000 more if fate allowed. The next 3 days passed in a haze of tension and anticipation. Sophia maintained her teaching schedule while discreetly observing Mayor Wilson's comings and goings. She noted that he spent unusual amounts of time at the telegraph office and held several meetings with strangers who arrived on the afternoon stage. On Thursday evening, Jackson came to her with news. The payroll arrives tomorrow at noon. Wilson's been seen meeting with 3 men who match the description of the gang members from the Prescott robbery. They're staying at the old Miller cabin outside town. Has your backup arrived? Sophia asked anxiously. Not yet, Jackson frowned. There was some trouble on the trail from Tucson. They may not make it in time. You can't face 4 men alone, she protested. It's suicide. I won't be alone, he assured her. I've spoken with Sheriff Taylor. He was Thomas's friend, though he never suspected Wilson. He'll back my play. That night, sleep eluded Sophia. She paced her small quarters, imagining all the ways tomorrow could go wrong, all the ways she might lose Jackson before they'd barely begun. By dawn, she had made a decision of her own. Friday dawned clear and hot. Sophia canceled classes, posting a note about a teacher's illness that was not entirely false anxiety had indeed made her physically ill. Instead of teaching, she positioned herself in the milliner's shop across from the bank, ostensibly examining hats while watching the street through the window. At 11:30, she spotted the first signs of trouble. 2 rough-looking men she'd never seen before took up positions at either end of the street. Mayor Wilson emerged from his office and walked casually toward the bank, nodding to citizens as he passed. There was no sign of Jackson or the sheriff. Just before noon, the Prescott stage rolled in with an armed guard riding shotgun. The payroll had arrived. As the strongbox was unloaded and carried toward the bank, Sophia saw Wilson give a subtle signal to the men at the end of the street. They began moving forward, hands drifting toward hidden weapons. Heart pounding, Sophia slipped out of the milliner's shop and hurried toward the bank. She had to warn someone. She had almost reached the bank steps when the first gunshot rang out, followed by shouts and screams as people scattered for cover. Everything happened at once. The 2 men on the street drew their weapons. A third appeared from the alley beside the bank. Mayor Wilson pulled a revolver from inside his coat and aimed it at the guard carrying the strongbox. "Nobody move," Wilson shouted. "This is a robbery." From behind the water trough across the street, Jackson suddenly rose, his badge gleaming in the sunlight. "U.S. Marshal, drop your weapons." Sheriff Taylor emerged from the bank doorway, shotgun raised. "Do as he says." For one frozen moment, everyone stood motionless. Then Wilson grabbed Sophia, yanking her against him with his gun pressed to her temple. "Drop your weapons or the schoolteacher dies," he snarled. Terror paralyzed Sophia momentarily, but then something hardened inside her. She would not be used against Jackson. As Wilson's attention fixed on the lawman, she drove her elbow backward with all her strength, catching him in the ribs. His grip loosened just enough for her to twist away. A shot rang out. Sophia felt something burn across her upper arm as she stumbled forward. More gunfire erupted around her. She hit the ground hard, rolling beneath the boardwalk as bullets splintered wood above her. The gunfight lasted less than a minute, though it seemed to stretch for hours. When silence finally fell, Sophia peered out to see 2 of the gang members lying motionless in the street. The third was on his knees, hands raised in surrender. Sheriff Taylor stood over him, shotgun unwavering. Mayor Wilson was sprawled on the bank steps, clutching his shoulder where blood soaked through his expensive coat. Jackson was securing his wrists with handcuffs, his expression grim. "Sophia," he called, spotting her emerging from beneath the boardwalk. He rushed to her side, his face pale with fear as he saw the blood staining her sleeve. "You're hurt." "It's just a graze," she assured him, though the pain was beginning to register now that the danger had passed. "Is it over? Did you get them all?" "All 4, he confirmed, carefully examining her wound. "Wilson confessed everything as soon as he was hit. Apparently he doesn't have much stomach for pain. He admitted to arranging Thomas's murder and planning both robberies." Relief swept through Sophia, followed by a wave of dizziness. "I think I need to sit down," she murmured. Jackson scooped her into his arms without hesitation, carrying her toward Doc Simmons's office. "I told you to stay away from the bank today," he scolded, though there was no real anger in his voice, only concern and something deeper, something that made her heart flutter despite the pain. "I couldn't let you face it alone," she replied, resting her head against his chest. "Stubborn woman," he murmured, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "You could have been killed." "So could you," she countered. "I'd say we're evenly matched in stubbornness." His chuckle rumbled against her cheek. "That we are." The next week was a whirlwind of activity in Copper Canyon, U.S. Marshals arrived from Tucson to take custody of Wilson and his accomplices. The town council, now minus its mayor, voted unanimously to restore Sophia's full salary and guarantee the school's operation for the entire year. Most importantly, Jackson received a telegram from his superiors commending his work and granting his request for reassignment to the Arizona Territory. As Sophia's arm healed, Jackson was a constant presence, bringing meals, reading to her in the evenings, and gradually telling her more about his life before Copper Canyon, his childhood in Colorado, his decision to become a lawman after his parents were killed in an Indian raid, his close bond with his brother Thomas. 2 weeks after the failed robbery, when Sophia had returned to teaching and the town had begun to settle, Jackson arrived at the schoolhouse after classes with a picnic basket and a mysterious smile. "I thought we might take that ride up to Whispering Pines you've been wanting," he suggested. "It's a perfect afternoon for it." The small grove of pine trees on a ridge overlooking the valley was Sophia's favorite spot near town, though she rarely had time to visit. Jackson helped her into the saddle of the gentle mare he'd borrowed from the livery, and they rode out of town as the afternoon sun bathed the landscape in golden light. At the ridge, they spread a blanket beneath the trees and unpacked a feast far more elaborate than their usual picnics: fried chicken, biscuits, fresh peaches, and even a small cake. "What's the occasion?" Sophia asked, accepting a tin cup of lemonade. "Do I need an occasion to spend time with the woman I love?" Jackson replied, his eyes holding her steadily. Sophia's breath caught. It was the first time either of them had spoken of love so directly, though it had been growing between them for weeks. "No," she managed finally. "No occasion needed at all." They ate and talked as the sun began its descent toward the western mountains, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. When the meal was finished, Jackson grew unusually quiet, a hint of nervousness in his usually confident demeanor. "Sophia," he began finally, taking her hands in his. "When I came to Copper Canyon, I was a man consumed by the past, by grief and the need for justice. I never expected to find a future here." She squeezed his hands encouragingly, her heart beginning to race. "You changed everything," he continued. "You showed me there could be more to life than vengeance and duty. You made me want things I'd given up hoping for: a home, a family, someone to build a life with." He released her hands to reach into his pocket, withdrawing a small velvet box. Sophia's breath caught as he opened it to reveal a delicate gold ring with a small, perfect diamond. "I know it hasn't been very long," he said, his voice husky with emotion. "But out here, we learn to recognize what's precious when we find it. And you, Sophia Valmont, are the most precious thing I've ever found." Tears welled in Sophia's eyes as Jackson slid from the blanket to one knee before her. "I love you," he said simply. "I love your courage, your kindness, your stubborn determination to do what's right no matter the cost. I love the way you care for your students, the way you never gave up even when things seemed hopeless. I love the life I can imagine building with you." He held the ring between them, a promise gleaming in the fading sunlight. "Sophia Valmont, will you do me the extraordinary honor of becoming my wife?" Joy surged through Sophia like a river breaking free of ice in spring. "Yes," she whispered, then louder, "Yes, Jackson O'Malley, I will marry you." His face lit with a smile that rivaled the sunset as he slipped the ring onto her finger. Then he gathered her into his arms, his kiss conveying all the promises words couldn't contain. As twilight deepened around them, they remained on the ridge, planning their future together, a future that had seemed impossible just weeks ago when Sophia stood humiliated outside Dawson's general store. "You ever think about that first day?" she asked, nestled against his chest as they watched stars begin to appear overhead. "What might have happened if you hadn't come along when you did?" Jackson's arms tightened around her. "I believe we would have found each other somehow," he said. "Some things are meant to be." Sophia smiled, turning the ring on her finger, still marveling at how dramatically her life had changed. From destitution and desperation to love and promise, all beginning with a chance encounter outside a general store and the simple offer of a stranger's arm. "I think you're right," she murmured, tilting her face up for another kiss. "Some things are indeed meant to be."